restructured their debt via something called Chapter 15 bankruptcy, which is pretty complicated, but here's exactly what it is. This is something we're going to hear about a lot. So imagine I was Evergrande, an irresponsible child who owned a lot of these Moogle toys, which represents all the people that I owe money to. Now imagine that I had so many of these toys laying around the house that I eventually asked my friends to hold on to these toys for me. And then one day, my parents, which represent the corpse, get mad at me, and they decide that I've been neglecting my toys too long, so they're going to give them all away. So to decide who's owed a Moogle, aka who's owed the money, they're put in charge, which is pretty important because when you're giving toys away, you're going to have a lot of kids from different neighborhoods who are going to want a piece of them. That's essentially what's going on with Evergrande, except substitute kids with shareholders, bondholders, employees, property owners, and substitute the different neighborhoods.
Google again, explain it like I'm 5 minutes. Now the next stage of China's bad news is an even bigger property developer, the owner of which became the richest woman in China.
She was once Asia's richest woman, but Yang Huiyan has since lost more wealth than any other billionaire in the world in just over 2 years. Some $28.6 billion is being done. All lost as her company, the Chinese property developer Country Garden, will deeper into a debt crisis.
Its largest builder by sales, the firm is now at risk of defaulting.
So unlike Evergrande, which people knew about since 2021, Country Garden took people by complete surprise because this was supposed to be China's strongest real estate developer with a ton of cash on their balance sheet. In fact, they promised to deliver 700,000 properties. So far, they've delivered roughly half of that, and they're having trouble. And they've also missed 2 bond payments to their shareholders, which is also why in the last 30 days, the stock has lost almost 40% in value. And since the beginning of this year, it's down over 72%. The stock is now only worth 10 cents. And because Country Garden has roughly 4 times the amount of projects in development than Evergrande, if they collapse, the question is kind of selfish, but it's something everyone is wondering: how will the US be affected by this? Presumably, it's going to be the US companies that bought into Country Garden's bonds to get those interest payments. But there are a couple companies here in the US that actually did that. Companies like BlackRock, Fidelity International, UBS, JP Morgan, and a couple others, which is scary because these are all companies we know and probably use. Now the good news is this: those numbers are in the couple $100 million worth, which sounds like a lot, but relative to those companies' balance sheets and assets under management, which are in the trillions, this is relatively a small amount. So if the worst was to happen and Country Garden's bonds go to zero, then they should have zero impact on all those companies, theoretically. But as I've said before, whatever happens in China doesn't stay in China. So anything could happen. And unfortunately, the Chinese middle class is already starting to be affected, and it's also starting to impact the shadow banking sector.
Do we have a handle? I mean, if we extend China's problems beyond property and we start thinking about the shadow banking system there, you know, how does that impact the economy overall?
So here's what shadow banking is, because it sounds cloak and dagger and kind of evil, but that's only because it kind of is. So here's the unofficial explanation of how shadow banking works.
If you send me 2 Bitcoin, I'll send you 1 back, right?
Now here's what the official definition of what shadow banking is. Shadow banking describes financial intermediaries that participate in creating credit but are not subject to regulatory oversight. Alright, so imagine you're back at Toys R Us again. When you go in there, you know that there are certain rules and expectations. Like, when you buy a toy, you're probably going to get a receipt. And there's a return policy, most likely. And what you see is what you get. So if you see $4.95, you're not going to be like, I'll give you $3.50 for it. There is no haggling. And the owner of Toys R Us will uphold these rules. Those are the basics, and that is the regulated banking industry. But now the shadow banking industry, imagine a playground full of kids. Let's call it Play Club. They could, in theory, just trade the toys with each other because there are no prices, only the prices that they set for themselves. And they could even let each other borrow their toys in exchange for something else because there are no receipts and there are no rules. The only rule is, don't talk about Play Club. That's the shadow banking industry. There's not a lot of official data out there, as you would imagine, but it exists sort of like dark matter in outer space. We can't see it, but we know it's there. It exists in the shadows, outside of regulatory purview. And here's what's crazy.
Hey. Oh
Today,
my god,
I'm
dude.
visiting Johanna Howe, home design superstar.
Oh my god.
Johanna, this is such an impressive business.
Jesus.
How do you stay on top of it?